Australians will decide whether to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in the Constitution through a referendum. It is the first for the nation this century. There are more than 17.6 million people on the electoral roll, and like an election, if you're on it, it is compulsory to vote. If you don't, without a good reason, you risk a $20 fine. The Australian Electoral Commission says about 5 million people have already cast their ballot at early polling centres, and around 2 million others have applied for a postal vote. Voting hubs will be set up in public buildings such as schools, churches and halls. And they will be open across the country from 8 local time tomorrow morning until 6 p.m. When people arrive, they will be signed off and presented with a ballot paper and told to write yes or no to the question on the form. It'll read a proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? The count begins tomorrow night when the first polls close at 6 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. The AEC says all votes cast on the day will be counted tomorrow night, along with the majority of pre-poll votes, and most postal ballots will take longer to be processed. Analysts and commentators could make a call on the result depending on how close the margin is, but the AEC says it won't make a declaration tomorrow night, and that could take up to 13 days. For the referendum to be successful, the yes vote needs support by a double majority. That means more than half of voters have to back the proposal, plus it needs a yes majority in at least 4 of the 6 states. Now, our example here is just that. It doesn't reflect polling or the potential outcome. The change won't pass if more than half of voters across the country write no, or there's a majority no vote in at least 3 states. Votes from the 2 territories will count towards the national majority only. People are being told not to wear campaign material, such as shirts or a hat with slogans, when they go to vote. The AEC says, like elections, campaigning is not allowed inside or within 6 metres of a polling place entrance.
Our role is to provide a neutral place for people to cast a vote, and the Electoral Act says that you can't campaign in a polling place. So if you are turning up and you're wearing a T-shirt or a hat or something and you're campaigning in the polling place, you won't be allowed in. It's as simple as that. But if you're an elector, you're just going in to cast a vote, you're wearing a T-shirt and you're in and out, that should be fine. The issue is that people view this through the prism of what they want to do. If they're very proud of their no or their yes T-shirt, they want to wear it in. Just remember, it's a respectful place where everyone is supposed to be able to express a view. It's as simple as that.
The ABC's referendum correspondent Dan Borscher is with me now in the studio. So Dan, after this 6-week campaign, where do the yes and no sides sit in that?
Yeah, Gemma, good to be with you. Well, we know that this is the final run to the referendum, to the vote closing, well, opening tomorrow morning, closing tomorrow night. And today we're seeing campaigners and politicians from both campaignings crisscrossing the country, trying to win over what we believe are between 30 to 40% of undecided voters. We know that the Prime Minister has begun the day in Adelaide. South Australia and Tasmania are really shaping as the 2 key states, and that's because they have the same power in terms of the second part of the vote count that you were just describing there, but they have a much smaller population, so both campaigns have really targeted them, thinking that they're the most easy to move. But of course, all of that depends on the way Australians vote tomorrow. The Prime Minister, as I mentioned, started the day in South Australia in Adelaide. We understand he's going to be giving a news conference very soon. We've also seen that Warren Mundine, one of the key no campaigners, I understand he's about to cast his early vote this morning, and so we will likely be hearing from him later today. And of course, if we do hear from Warren Mundine, we'll be bringing his views as well as those of the Prime Minister live here on the news channel.
Now, Dan, we know that this campaign has taken its toll on many people, particularly First Nations people. I know you've been travelling around the country. Now, we'll go to that in a moment, but what positives have you seen as part of this campaign? I've
seen the most extraordinary resilience, generosity and goodwill from Australians of all walks of life who are really leaning into this conversation and wanting to have a bigger discussion about Indigenous affairs, what it means to be an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person in Australia right now. And some have even been talking to me about what does it mean to be an Australian. And that shows you, Gemma, just the breadth of some of the issues that have arisen. In terms of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, I've been hearing such a willingness to share stories that are often very difficult and painful, but give us a sense of the impacts of policies, many of the past, some that are still in place, and about the way that they impact the way people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, see Australia and see life right now, not with a view about saying that this is about blame or this is about saying you are responsible, but about saying this is part of all of our shared history. And in order to really know ourselves, we have to know our history. We have to understand the impact of the past.
Now, we are standing by to take our viewers to the Prime Minister and the words that he will be saying just on this eve, the final full day of campaigning, Dan. Now, as we said there, those have been the positive aspects that you've seen, but we know this campaign has taken its toll. What is that toll?
Yeah, most certainly. And it's the very vocal and I believe small fringe who have been spouting racism and bigotry and hate and have really been targeting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. These are the types of people that have been putting out misinformation and disinformation, trying to blur the lines to make this discussion about anything other than the words that will be on the ballot paper, either if you've already voted, one of the millions who have, or if you're going to be voting today and, of course, tomorrow. And I think that the damage that has been done by some of what we've heard will give us a sense of what we need to start healing afterwards. There have been enormous wounds inflicted by some of the commentary around this debate this year. And I've been speaking to people that have been coming to me and saying, do you know what, Dan, we're subbing out of this discussion. We don't want to be a part of it. It is too toxic. I even had one Aboriginal leader tell me just in the last couple of days that they felt like their identity was what was actually being discussed and debated, their right to exist. And it chilled me, and I suspect it will many, because that's not what this is about, and it's not what it should be about.
Now, what you said there, that line, what happens afterwards, I mean, that's what we need to grapple with. We don't know the result as yet. So how do we know what happens next? Well,
I think it will depend very much on what happens tomorrow. I know that the polls are saying one thing. I've been hearing so many different views as I'm travelling around, and many, many Australians who are yet to make up their mind. Even now, like just last week, I met an engineer, a young engineer, who said, Dan, I didn't realise there was a referendum until just 2 days ago. Yeah. And I thought, he must be making fun of me, and he said, no, I don't consume media. I'm not interested in what politicians say, which tells us something about all the ways of communication, not on social media either, which of course has been a huge part of this. In terms of what happens next, so if it's a yes, then the focus will be on the government and the campaigners for the yes side to really outline how do you deliver on all the commitments that were made throughout this discussion? And how do you, if that's the will of the Australian people, then how do you start to design the voice body that will be advising Parliament, and what does that look like? If it's a no side, then I think the question is quite similar, because we have heard day in, day out politicians and campaigners from all persuasions saying that what is happening right now, the status quo is not working to deal with the intractable challenges that some Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people face. So if that is in fact the belief and the consolidated view of everyone on both sides of the campaign, then what is what happens next? The Prime Minister has said if it fails, he won't be legislating it. And we've heard Ken Wyatt, the former Indigenous Australians Minister for the Liberal Party, saying this morning that the Prime Minister simply wouldn't have the mandate